Welcome back to Dragon Army Books. My name is Dustin, and this is a review of the third book in the series, The Faithful and the Fallen by John Gwynne. The book is called Ruin, and in this review, there are going to probably be some very, very light spoilers. Now, virtually every single one of my reviews on this channel are spoiler free. I want anybody to be able to watch the video at any given time and not feel like they're going to have major plot moments spoiled and ruined for them. However, this is the third book in a series of 4. And so I can't possibly talk about narrative or characters without giving a little bit of a warning at the front of the video. That's what I'm doing now. Before I get too far ahead of myself, I want to lay out the plot very vaguely so you can kind of have an understanding of where the author is taking the story in the third entry in The Faithful and the Fallen. We pick up mere moments after the conclusion of Valor, and the God War has now blossomed into bloody chaos as the demonic Kadoshim are unleashed on the Banished Lands. It is not looking good for our protagonists and team. Everything is coming against them, including hell itself. Relationships are formed, renewed, and broken. Loyalties are tested, and in typical John Gwynne fashion, so many lives are brutally lost. If you've read or watched my other reviews on Malice and Valor, the first 2 books in the series, then you will know that I have enjoyed thoroughly this series. However, there has been a little bit of issue for me, particularly with the pacing and the sheer number of cast members. I have felt the series to be somewhat of a grind, and that's a mixture of negative and positive. I'll start with the positive first. The positive part of the grind is that it makes the payoff worth it. Once you learn and know the characters and you give yourself into the world building that Gwynne is doing, then it becomes so familial. It becomes so familiar. It becomes so like a warm blanket that you're pulling over yourself in the cold of night. It feels good. But the grind is also somewhat tedious, and it's an uphill climb to be able to get to that point, particularly in Malice, less so in Valor, and virtually none at all here in Ruin. And then my complaint with the characters has been the massive cast list. There are over 100 characters that you must keep up with. That is legitimately the case. There are a dozen plus point of views in any particular book, and there are so many different regions and cities and families and connections that you're supposed to be able to track so that you can feel the emotional weight of all that's going on in the world, and that is just too much for me. Now, I get that that is going to differ from person to person, but for me, I much prefer a smaller cast. However, here in the third book, when it comes to the characters, I think I know the majority of them by now. I am still flipping to the front, to the cast of characters, the extensive list there, as a reminder every once in a while, but I'm so much more familiar with the characters by now, and I've grown to know them and love them or hate them, and so I have to flip there less. And then when it comes to the pacing, there is no uphill climb at this point. We are in the war proper, and it is non-stop action here. And Gwynne knows how to write action scenes. And it's not all bloody battle, although a lot of it is. Some of it is some subversive conversations that are going on. Some of it is politicking. Some of it is religion-based, but there's a lot of battle. And is it just me, or does Gwynne kind of like dial up the violence to 11 in this one? Seriously, if you are sensitive to descriptive scenes of mutilation, torture, battle loss, then either skip this one or fast forward through certain scenes because it gets brutal. Something happened to me in this reading that doesn't typically happen to me. I've acknowledged before that I'm not an extremely emotional reader. I would love to be more of an emotional reader, but I'm typically somewhat reserved and just enjoying the story as it's given to me. Not the case here in Ruin. And it's no surprise because I'm so attached to the characters and to the story at this point, but still, Gwynne writes it in such a way that I dreaded turning the page. I dreaded any time a character was brought back into the focus because I knew that things were not going to go well. The book is titled Ruin, after all. And this was particularly amped up as I got towards the end of the story. I had this crushing anxiety within me. Seriously, I did not want to turn the next page. I did not want to read the next sentence because I didn't want bad things to happen to characters that I loved. Even when there were happy or peaceful moments, I still had my heart palpitations because I knew that that couldn't be all there was to it. There were still pages left in the book, words left in the book, which meant there was still pain to be had in the book. And while he met my expectations some there, he subverted my expectations in many other ways. He took the story in places that I didn't think that it was going to go. In fact, I had a thought of, hey, he was going to subvert my expectations in this way. And I can't really expand on what some of my expectations were without spoiling too much, but he didn't go that way and instead did something entirely different. I'm really incredibly excited to get to Wrath, the final book in the series, and to find out what he actually does and how it all concludes, because I still firmly believe there's going to be some big changes and some subversions to the tropes and the narrative that he still has left in his sleeves and or pockets. At this point in the series, I love the characters more than ever before. There are particular characters in this story that rose in my ranks of favorites by far. And then there are others that I've always kind of enjoyed, but there were two in particular that their stories I was most intrigued by. All of that to say, there is still one issue that I have in this series, and it's this. With the vast cast of characters and the multiple upon multiple POVs, I often get lost with where all of the stories are at any given point in time. So when we come back to a POV that we haven't seen for 5, 6, 7, 8 chapters, I have to take a moment to remind myself where we are with this character and get re-engaged emotionally in that particular character's story. I still feel like this series could have been even better if we would have just dialed back the cast even just a little bit. But that is really my only complaint at this point. I have found this series to be endearing, beloved, and I'm only loving it more and more. If Ruin is this much for me, then what in the world is Wrath going to do for me and to me? I ended up giving Ruin 5 full stars. I believe that I gave both Malice and Valor 4.5 stars, but this came up to the fullness of the 5-star again. I am incredibly excited for what Gwynne has for us in the finale. In the comments down below, I'd love to know which character is your favorite at this point in the story. Mine currently, due to this book, are the Rogue Queen and the Old Wolf. They really stood out to me here in Ruin. As always, thank you so much for taking the time to watch and like this video. If you haven't yet, click subscribe, join the Dragon Army, and we'll see you in the next one.